In this video, I will take you through the entire process of replacing your rear struts on the 2012 to 2019 Toyota Highlander. I will be replacing these struts because they have been driven on for over 350,000 miles and they are not absorbing like they used to. I will be using OEM shocks and they are made by Hitachi. There are other options such as KYB and I will put links in the description below. Take a look at how fast this new shock releases. Now look at the old shock. Look at them together and you can see the difference. If you live in an area that rusts easily, I highly recommend buying the lower brackets and bolts because the bolts here can seize up and be very difficult to remove. However, the top bolts are not so bad. Having a torch or map gas will help for the top bolts, while the lower bolts might need to be cut off with a cut-off tool to save the lower brackets and bolts. That's what I will have to do, and I will show you the process. The cut-off process wasn't easy, so I highly recommend buying the lower brackets and bolts to make this job easier. These are the tools you will need to do this job. 17 and 19mm socket and ratchet to go with these, a map gas torch, cut-off tool if you plan on reusing the brackets and bolts, jack and jack stand, lug nut removal socket, a breaker bar, and if you have a bench vise, that would be good. An impact wrench or impact driver will speed up the process, so having one would be good. Links for all these products will be in the description below. Let's get started. I'll first loosen the lug nuts. I will now secure the front wheels from rolling. You can use wheel chucks if you have them, but I will be using a stone. I will lift the subframe from the back. I will now support with jack stands for safety, then lower the vehicle on the jack stands. I will now remove the wheel and place under the vehicle for added safety. It is best to remove the shocks by removing the shocks and brackets altogether, then remove the brackets from the shocks after they are off the vehicle. 3 17mm nuts hold the upper bracket and 2 17mm bolts hold the lower bracket. The upper nuts are off. The lower bolts are under here. The bolts are out and I can now remove the shock with the brackets from the vehicle. I have tried to remove this bolt while it was on the vehicle and I was using penetrating oil in the process, but I had no success. I will have to cut here to remove the bracket and cut off the inner part to save the bracket and bolt. For the upper bracket, I will remove this nut, apply penetrating oil and heat, then knock it right out. Having map gas is good if you don't have a torch. Let's remove the easier upper bracket first. I will first apply penetrating oil. Now I will heat this up, then use the impact wrench and socket to remove this nut. Note that the upper bushing will lessen the effectiveness of an impact wrench, so heating will help. I will use my feet to secure the bracket. A bench vise would be better. You might not have an impact wrench. Put this on a bench vise and use a 17mm socket and a breaker bar. If you don't have a bench vise, use a 17mm wrench, secure it on one side with tie straps, then use a 17mm socket and breaker bar to break this loose. The nut is off. I will now tap the bolt through with a hammer. To be safe, do not do it like I am doing it here. Place the 17mm nut back on the bolt before knocking it through. Then finish with a chisel or whatever you have that can work. You can see that I have a large deep socket at the other end to create space for the bolt to slide through. The upper bracket and bolts are off, and note that this is still hot. Now let's go to the more difficult lower bolt and bracket. I will now heat up this nut here. I needed a 17mm impact socket to remove this nut. I didn't have an impact socket at the time. I don't have an impact socket right now, so I will be removing this nut by hand. You might not have an impact wrench, so it is a good time to show you how this can be removed by hand. I will set up a 17mm wrench and hold it in place to the shock with tie straps. Now I can use a ratchet and a 17mm socket to remove this nut. I will use this bar extension to make it easier. This nut is off and I will now start the cutting process. Heating and knocking this loose didn't work for me, but you can try it. Yours might not be as rusted as mine. I will make several cuts until this is completely removed. My objective is to cut this into 2 pieces. So I will cut from the center while trying not to cut through the bolt because I will be reusing this. I will keep applying penetrating oil. I will continue to make small cuts until this is off. It will take a while, but you can avoid this by buying new brackets and bolts. If you have a hydraulic press, that might be able to work too. You can see that I've tried to knock it out and it didn't work. I had to cut it off. This bolt is now out and this is 1/2 of what I cut off. My camera wasn't recording the process and I thought it was. Sorry about that. I used this cutoff tool and I went through 2.5 blades for both sides. I can't believe how seized this was because it was this loose when brand new. I will definitely be applying anti-seize when installing these. If you happen to damage the threads on the bolt while knocking it through, apply penetrating oil to the bolt, then try to thread the nut on the damaged bolt. Take your time and screw it right down, and that should repair the threads. If you have a die set, this can be used to repair the threads. So the hard part is done. Let's install these new shocks. Install both upper and lower brackets on the shock. The nuts for the upper brackets will be torqued to 55 foot-pounds, and the 2 bolts for the lower brackets will be torqued to 75 foot-pounds. I have installed the lower brackets in the wrong direction. I will have to remove it and turn it in the other direction. I will now install the 2 bolts. Now I will torque these nuts for the upper bracket to 55 foot-pounds and the 2 lower bolts to 75 foot-pounds. I will torque this bolt right here at the upper bracket to 77 foot-pounds, and I will torque the nut for the lower bracket to 85 foot-pounds after installing the tire and the vehicle is lowered on the ground. That's it guys, that's how you replace the rear shocks and bracket on a 2014 to 2019 Toyota Highlander. See you on the next one guys.